Tēnā koutou, no mai, haere mai. Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by the Insurance Brokers Alliance. You're right at the place where we talk about affairs from far and wide from the perspective of our very well-informed and intelligent panel, who this week, we welcome back Karen Arnold.
Hi Bill, how are you?
And Hunter Andrews.
It's good to be here, Bill.
Thanks for coming. Hunter, going to you, general election, Prime Minister's announced it for September.
Yeah, I love, I'm always good and keen on a good general election, as everyone knows, and to have them sooner is always nice.
Yeah.
And I think that he needed to go early because I think his reasoning is quite good with the summit and not being able to have leaders visit New Zealand that want to come and have a look, investigate trade opportunities and things like that. By the time that happens in November, we really do have to have a government in place. And so he's allowing time for Winston Peters, who no doubt we will discuss tonight, to decide which way he will go. Yeah. And I think listening to him this morning on national radio, he's very much back in form. And it was pretty easy to pick that he'd go early. Yeah. And the earlier the better. I think that if they could have created some sort of crisis, which there wasn't one, they would have gone tomorrow.
But you've got the Royals coming.
That's right too,
and
the Royals.
You've got rugby and the All Blacks, so as long as they're all in winning form, it's a show-in.
Yeah, well, and also that a visit to the White House too is on the cards for John Key.
Yeah, but it's the All Blacks that they're the deal breakers, really. If they win...
Our elections won and lost over the All Blacks, do you think?
They are. History shows that.
Do you reckon
we
they
won the World Cup in
influence?
2011.
No, it's about the people feeling positive about life, and so no, it's a known fact.
Feel good factor.
Yeah, so that if the All Blacks are winning, let's say World Cups, etc., people going, yes, everything's good in life, government's fantastic. And if we're on a downer about the All Blacks, we're on a downer about life. And
actually, I have heard that, Steve, that it kind of goes against the government of the day.
Yep.
That,
if they're not winning.
Yeah.
And amazing, interesting, just to segue a wee bit, Matt McCartan coming back into, well, not back in, he left Labour with Jim Anderson, of course, to form New Labour in the 80s. To see him included in the makeup is, it'll be interesting to see what the Labour looks like in the next few weeks, because they're really going to have to, I think they're going to have to race to that traditional Labour voter. And Leslie Soper, who was named candidate here in Invercargill, confirmed as candidate over the weekend, and when I interviewed her, she was very much pushing that poverty, people living in poverty, is it acceptable that, we've got,
I saw that
people that have obviously done very well out of the last 30 years in New Zealand, and I think they will play that up. And we'll see a lot of old Labour emerging.
But I think the problem with that is that a negative campaign like that may not work in their favour, because the government has got some amazing statistics coming out in terms of the performance of the economy and in relation to how other countries in the world are doing. So if there's a whole lot of positive spin and Labour can't present a positive campaign, that will go against them.
They're going to have to go with, okay, so you've got, great figures in terms of the economy, so how do you explain this? These families, this is what's happening to them. I think they're going to have to go that way. So clearly the economic figures don't say it all.
The big problem was that 25% or 24% that didn't vote last time, and when surveyed over reasons why they didn't vote, couldn't be bothered, things like that, didn't get there. And that is Labour's constituency. A lot of those votes are Labour's core constituency. So if and the sentiment that's being portrayed a little through commentators is that it is like 1993, and they're sort of resigned to the fact that they're not going to win this election.
No, and they'll get themselves up for the term afterwards.
Yeah, they're going to try and lift the vote.
And I think what's really interesting is to see the clean out that National is having, rejuvenating the party at the very top as well. So they're doing that, but Labour are really just the same old, and that's going to have to happen probably sooner rather than later for them, because...
Cunliffe has made an impression, hasn't he?
Yeah, but what
impression?
What impression?
Really?
No, it's a terrible impression. It's embarrassing.
Him saying that the Prime Minister lives in a leafy Auckland suburb, and then, admittedly, the Prime Minister's house is worth $10 million, and David Cunliffe's is worth $2.5 million.
Poor David.
Yeah,
you know,
and he and his wife have got a joint income, they reckon.
in excess of $500,000.
Yeah, potentially $600,000. They're not in tune with real New Zealand.
No, New Zealanders don't mind people that succeed, but you know, to be a Labour leader and throw stones at John Key and the way he lives, and then to have immediately come back on him that, hey, hang on a minute, and then the excuse that we live in this neighbourhood because it's close to my wife's work, so she could come home to breastfeed.
Yeah, and then
that's why he doesn't live in his electorate.
And
it just doesn't ring true.
But it's the whole secret trust things where when he was campaigning for the leadership last year, he set up a trust to funnel in
hide the money,
donations, and we don't know who. There's a couple of major donors. We don't know
when
their
are
identity.
Politicians going to learn, and when are they going to stop doing this stuff? Because it just happens again and again, doesn't it? I mean, do they think they can get away with it?
Traditionally, it's been Labour that have had the luxury of pointing at National and saying you're doing it. But then he was doing it himself.
Right, on the following on from the whole John Banks thing, and you know, and the Kim.com, and here he is repeating it. Either that or he just wasn't up with the play, didn't know what was going on, but I can't imagine that.
And I hate to hark back to yesteryear because there will be a lot of reminiscing this year. Firstly, about the 30th anniversary of the 14th of July snap election by Rob Muldoon.
I remember it.
Herald, yes. Yeah, and then the 40-year anniversary of the death of Norman Kirk. And I, as a younger man, read a lot about Norman Kirk. My family spoke of him a lot.
I went to school with his son.
Right. Oh,
Same
well, that's
class.
another story, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And to read about Norman Kirk, and you know, he built his own house from scratch. He actually cast the bricks for it. You know, that's a Labour leader, isn't it? I know that's 40 years ago.
Yep.
But so what is the modern interpretation of a Labour leader as someone who lives in a $2.5 million house?
And Labour is full of academics. There are people that have studied politics and actually
there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, there's
got to be a bit of a balance, though.
Yeah, there's something wrong when you're top heavy with academics who actually haven't known what it is
At my last reading on that, looking at the number of academics in both parties, National Party looked more like the Labour Party. One would imagine that there were people. There was more.
Less degrees.
A lot less degrees there. Probably. I would say probably more self-made people.
And school of life. School of life,
that's how I put it. Now, what do we think about the fact that Winston's coming out and saying he won't declare his hand until after the votes are counted? If people... We're voting for a government, aren't we? And Winston has been described as the kingmaker. So don't people have the right to vote for the government they want, rather than, you know, if we vote for New Zealand First, and I've got a lot of time for New Zealand First, but if we vote for New Zealand First, we are basically voting for a party to choose the government if he does that. If he is the kingmaker,
for Winston Peters.
We're voting for whatever Winston chooses. Is this a healthy thing, Karen?
I just think this kingmaker thing, it's just a lazy headline that the mainstream media churns out from time to time. Every other election, it's the same old, and they're just attempting to make something interesting, but I think he's irrelevant. I really do.
To me, he's the poster boy for MMP. You know, he is the product of MMP. Although he will say the party's 20 years old, and he won Tauranga in the first past the post election, but you get what you get. If you vote for MMP, then you will have a populist politician like Winston Peters. And let's face it, he is like Jim Anderton. Once he leaves the circus or the boat or his captain steps off,
there
will be nothing. Like Bob Jones when he left the New Zealand Party.
New Zealand First, ACT's on the way down.
Yeah, and they're those personality-driven parties, and there's a certain amount...
But we've got Peter Dunn, so that's reassuring.
Well, yes, that's right. Well, we're lucky to have Peter there. But, you know, Winston is that classic example of... And he says the right things. As I said this morning on radio, he's saying he's hitting that... I was going, OK, now we're going to have something about immigration, and bang, something about immigration. It's all those little bells that he rings that ring true to their core supporters, and maybe rope in a few. But they're not National or Labour voters, they're New Zealand First.
What about the Greens?
Well, I just think, though, the risk is that when someone with a personality like Winston Peters brings in more than their fair share. I mean, that's happened in the past.
Well, we've seen problems he's had with his current caucus.
So those are the things. The Greens are on a slippery slope to oblivion by the looks of the polls at the moment. Anyway,
they won't. They won't be to oblivion.
They'll level off.
The Greens will always have a vote. It's just a question.
They
of how
shall,
much,
but Labor's turned its back on the Greens in the past week.
Shane Jones.
And they're now seem to be flirting with Winston more. The Labor Party does, so that'll be interesting.
Oh, well,
is that going to be helpful for them? You know, or does the country align the Greens in their mind with Labor? I mean, it's all very well for Labor to go and say, "Oh, we're going to do that," but are they forgetting who's giving them the votes?
I don't know how strong the left is. I really don't. Yeah.
Well, the left is the left, and it fluctuates. And when Labor's fortunes decline, the Greens go up. And there's always that fringe voters on that left-wing element that are keen to move their vote, and they know they're voting for a centre-left bloc, and National unlikely, and I would have said that about the Māori Party actually, to be honest, wouldn't work with them.
We need to talk about that.
Well, that's another probably sad story politically in New Zealand, that with Tariana Turia going, and they haven't announced the replacement yet, and we're well into selection. They're looking for a female co-leader, and they haven't named one.
She has been so strong, so strong, and such a voice of reason, hasn't she?
Yeah,
I mean, we always knew if Tariana was going to say something, we'd stop and listen. It was always something sensible. It always reflected some mainstream thinking, common sense.
And she presents herself with grace, I think.
Well,
she just has
mana,
and she's a very graceful person. So she's never hysterical or frowning or anything like that. She's always considered.
And she wants to get on with her life outside politics. And let's hope that they do select
which shows how sensible she really is.
A candidate that will. I was speaking to Reno Terakatini, MP for Tito Tonga, about what he'd heard about the Māori Party, who would be the candidate, because they of course held it previous to Reno, and he said that he'd heard they were ringing round. In fact, they'd rung his cousin. And he said, "Look, I don't think you realise this, but Reno's my cousin, and I'm not going to run against him."
No.
So it'll be interesting to see how. I don't know. I think that they going with National. I think probably in 25 years, political historians will look back and go, "Well, at least they got some things done in that 6 years."
They did,
and they have. So whether that's a legacy of the Māori Party, I don't know. And let's watch those Māori seats and whether they roll back to Labour. And
of course, there'll be one that won't. What do you reckon? One seat that won't.
Maybe. Which one are you thinking?
Well,
we've got Peter Sharple's gone.
No. This is
Hone?
Yeah, Hone seat. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes, of course, not for Māori Party.
Yeah.
Yes, and another player that can't be dismissed, and I don't sure whether he would get on board with Labour, but he would certainly support them in supply.
He seems to have huge
and
support.
Confidence.
Hone Harawira, we're talking about, seems to have huge support in his own electorate, doesn't he? I mean, the guy is well established there.
And a huge name too.
A huge name and extremely difficult to prize out, and seems to be growing in common sense.
Although we're not hearing a lot about him at the moment.
He may come out and say something. It's my feeling that there's a lot of the poorer people in the country who might well have felt Hone's the only person who's saying something for any of us, north to south, Māori, Pakeha, everybody included.
You can say those things though when there's no possibility that you will actually have to
be
act
Prime
on
Minister.
It. And that's the tradition of smaller fringe parties.
Right. Whilst we're on politics, Karen, the Minister of Justice seems to have put her foot in it. Yes. Had dinner. Well, I'll read to you. Mrs. Collins revealed today she had a dinner with the head of Oravida, and the head was Oravida Stone Shi, a senior Chinese government official, excuse me mixing that up there, while in China last year, and admits she was wrong not to disclose the dinner last week. This is from a quote in
a cup of tea on the way to the airport, wasn't it?
Yeah, well,
glass of milk,
glass of milk. Mrs. Collins has been under pressure to explain her dealings. Anyway, the comment with the Prime Minister was that she had responsibility to reveal all of the meetings that she held in Beijing. Even if one of them was a private meeting, she certainly should have made me aware of that. Mr Key said her actions had led to accusations of a perception of a conflict of interest, and that is unacceptable. And he made it clear to her in no uncertain terms how disappointed he was, and said she could not repeat the mistake. Asked whether she was on her last chance, Mr Key said, "I wouldn't want to be in her shoes if there was a repeat of it." Is this her final warning, Karen?
Yeah, it's been touted as that, and I've just heard her on radio being quoted, and she said, "Oh, well, you know, I just answered the questions as I was asked them," and
Tricky.
It's one of those things where you're dishonest by omission.
Yeah.
And so in her mind, she could have justified, well, they asked me the questions and I answered them honestly. But if you can give more information and give the whole picture, then that's what you should do. And she is formidable as a politician. I think the media find her formidable to deal with, and she won't be liking this very much at all, because it will be extremely embarrassing.
It looked like
for
a
her.
difficult. Did you see the interview with her, Hunter?
From what I've seen, it was interesting to see her response anyway. And she looked like she was on the back foot, but being assertive.
Yes.
Assertively on the back foot.
Yes.
And as you say, not by omission really. But I'm thinking of the incident with Nick Smith when he used letterhead. Was it ACC letterhead or something,
Yes.
to write a
Something
letter
like
to
that.
someone? And he lost his ministerial portfolios. He's a very capable minister, as is Judith Collins. So you can't afford to live without them for long, because there's only a certain amount of people in the country capable of that. But I think that it would have looked bad for John Key, and it's not over yet, of course. It would have looked bad for John Key to sack a minister this close to an election.
Well, I think too that if he's resolute now and the media can't make any issue of it, he's just said, well, you know, so be it, that's what I've decided.
Yeah, hey,
it's done
let's
and
change the
dusted.
flag. Hang
yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It's done and dusted, but if she was to be sacked or whatever, then you open everything up for analysis and stuff. So it may be an unpopular decision right at this moment, but long-term leading up to the election, it's probably quite
You've got to
cunning
hand it
plan.
to Key.
Yeah.
This here basically seems to be the golden response, doesn't it? I mean, he's kind of said, well, I've told her, you know, I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you. You're a very naughty girl, etc., etc. And what else can they say?
And we've seen over the years politicians get into trouble and be sacked, and then 6 months later, after they've done their penance, they're back again, and that's on, you know, the Labour government with Ruth Dyson. We've seen Nick Smith and others, so it's par for the course.
Peter Dunn's not back yet, is he?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
he is.
Oh, he is back.
Yeah.
Minister of Internal Affairs.
He is. He's back.
Not revenue, but Minister of Internal Affairs.
So they suffered the embarrassment, and then they come back.
That seems to be the way, isn't it? It's not oblivion anymore,
No,
those sorts of mistakes. And maybe that's a good thing, because people should be allowed to make mistakes.
And they have experience, vast experience. Yeah.
That you can't, as a country with only 4.5 million people, there's only a certain percentile that are capable to deal with the media and run a ministry and run their lives. And, you know, you've got to appreciate those people, because you're going to end up with someone who's probably not as capable.
Yeah.
And that's bad for all of us.
And there's no question. I mean, when you look at the way it's reported, the media are very intent on finding fault with politicians, be it personal things or whatever. And sometimes I wonder if they are not far too focused on those things rather than on the policies that these guys are creating,
and it's just
which affects
easy.
the whole country.
It's just too easy. There must be so many other things that they could really get their teeth into, but it's too difficult, so they just do the headline grabbers.
And if you're watching the networks, as I do each night, both of them, you see that they are tit for tat, really. And one of them feeling that to take a close-up look at certain legislation making its way through Parliament will be boring. And so who wants to make that first move?
Exactly.
And so, you know, Judith Collins will ride the storm out unless there's more to be revealed. And that was incredibly politically naive of her to do that. I don't know what she was thinking.
Arrogant.
I couldn't believe it.
It might have been arrogant.
Either naive or arrogant.
It was probably more arrogant.
Yeah.
Delusions of untouchability.
She must have known that the prestige, even talking to Eric Roy here, of course, current sitting MP, when he goes to China, he says the fact that he's the Deputy Speaker of the House gives him prestige there, because he can tell the Prime Minister of the country to sit down and be quiet.
Yes.
You know, and he said that counts for the Chinese, that ability, that authoritative figure. So when Judith Collins goes over there as a Minister of the Crown, Justice Minister and endorses a product, then of course it's going to be used.
She didn't endorse a product, she promoted one.
That's right, I suppose. It's a bit different, isn't it? And the fact that her husband was involved, you know.
Yes.
I mean, that is the whole story, really, isn't it? I mean, it's wrong
And
for
it's
her to
not
have
really
gone
a
there
story,
to Orovita if
you
he hadn't been involved and said that.
Yeah.
It still would have been done.
Yeah,
Yes.
but still.
You
And
just
there you
can't
have it.
endorse products.
And there you have it. When you become a minister, don't go to China promoting
Tick
products
that
of the
off.
country. Tick that off your
Won't
list.
go to China.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be back with more advice after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newsroom. Well, news in the south. We have a Labor candidate now, Karen, has been chosen to stand for the next election.
Yeah.
Leslie Soper.
Yeah, I think she will probably be feeling pretty pleased with herself this week, given that she was the nominee and then Labor halted the process and said, oh no, we think we'll go again and see if we can get another candidate up against her. So she may have felt a wee bit put out by the party and disappointed by that. So she'll be feeling good that she has gone up against another candidate and been selected by the majority that she needed to impress. So yeah.
Michael Gibson, who was that other nominee,
Yes.
who had formerly worked for Pete Hodgson in Dunedin North as the secretary. I wasn't privy to what was through that selection process, but it's a very public one. And let's contrast that with national, because I was repeatedly ringing people going, what is going on? I can see this clear fishbowl type process with Labor, relatively. I mean, obviously they're probably at home going, well, Hunter, you just don't know how much he's down on. We got him, didn't we? But then we've got National, who are very close shop, and I keep hearing these names. There were 3 or 4 names that kept floating up, and then I just kept getting told it's closed door process, we'll let you know on that day. And then so Sarah Dowie was named, and she has been groomed through the candidate school that they go through, and is ready and rearing to go, which will make, I know this shouldn't be exceptional, but we've got 2 women contesting the seat. And
an empty seat.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's going to be
with a 6,234 majority.
But Invercargill hasn't always been like that, has it? I mean, the last time we had a Labor
MP, that was Mark
MP,
Peck.
it was Mark Peck, and he had a good majority for Labor.
But that's interesting because
Boundary change in 2007.
yeah, there was that,
it
and the Labor Party were very proactive. The election he won, where they got into their cars and they got people into the cars and drove them to the polling booth.
Is this what's needed?
Well, I think what happened back then was National was complacent and Labor was very proactive in getting people to the.
But Mark Peck didn't get in just once. I mean,
3 times.
He got in 3 times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't as though National got caught out on one occasion,
No,
was
but then
it?
Mark did, didn't he?
Mark knew the issues though. He played the issues well.
Yeah.
You know, the Victor Spencer thing, getting him pardoned after his execution. That struck at a lot of heartstrings.
Yeah, but then he had a bit of an. Who closed the schools first? Because Mark was.
Well, it's Trevor Mallard.
Yeah,
that's
so
why
that
we
was,
dislike Trevor Mallard.
and that was his sort of the nail in.
Yeah.
Well, it was in the final
Mark's.
year or the final part of Mark Peck's.
Yeah, and then he had his running, his personal, down
So
to
98 was the school closures, and then he won it in 99.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh.
And
I'm just trying to
he
think.
was
actually
quite
around that
vocal
way.
about Surrey Park.
Yeah.
I think he did what he could.
Yes.
And or at least it looked like he was doing what he could,
Yeah.
which is everything really for your constituents.
But when you're the incumbent, you do get, you've got an advantage,
you're
don't
out
you?
there.
You're out there, you're being reported, you're being seen. And when it comes to the daytime, and we know it's true, that names and recognition, whether it's good or bad, do mean ticks.
That is
They
the
do.
big mission for Sarah Dowie, isn't it? To get that name recognition, and I have to confess, I had no idea who she was.
It's going to be hard for her.
And she acknowledges that and knows that that's the uphill battle.
But then she
she'll
hasn't
have.
got any baggage either.
also,
She's got a
yeah.
clean slate, and if she's articulate and is a warm person, then she could do really well just on a personality. I don't know
Exactly.
anything
So,
about her, so And so Leslie, on the other hand, has baggage. And the fact that she has stood over and over and over again and never got there on the electorate vote, she has made it into Parliament, and then she's gone out, and then she got in again because someone had gone off the list or out of Parliament, and she was in there temporarily. So it's been a bit...
Well, but that gives her an insight into the parliamentary process.
Yeah.
She sat on select committees.
Yeah,
I think she chaired a select committee, she was saying. And so that's invaluable knowledge to have as you head back up to Wellington. And we'll see, because remember last time she said that she wouldn't take a place on the Labour list. Yeah. Now, I don't know whether that's because the place that she was offered
was so low,
that it wouldn't have been positive for her. But now she's saying she's going for a place on the list. So let's see where that place is on the list and how Labour ranked that experience, because she stood in Wallace in '93, the Wallace electorate, that became Clutha Southland. She ate into the votes then. Then she stood against Bill English and ate into the votes, and she did eat into the majority he had. And then, and she pointed this out to me today, and I do remember it now, I think it was 2002, the networks were there at her office because they thought they smelt an upset.
Do you know, you've just made me think that maybe this whole Labour thing was to endorse her more.
Conspiracy here?
Well, no, but maybe if, you're it, but you're against no one. Well, it sort of is like a bit of a lame...
It certainly put her in the news, didn't it? Rather than just saying, who's the Labour candidate?
Oh, well, we only had one
Leslie's
person. So they said, hey, let's beef this up again and give her a bit of kudos that she's actually stood against someone and been chosen.
Yeah. She's a fighter.
So maybe...
Whether or not they decided to do that, it's worked.
Yeah, well,
And I remember talking to her when they opened that nomination process up again and said, how do you feel about this nomination process being reopened? And she would just... Well, it's all good for the party.
Yes,
it is all good for the party that people get a choice and they get someone else to listen to. So she was saying the right things and saying, well, bring it on. Just like David Cunliffe.
And she may have been
just
thinking,
like the leadership
this is
debate.
just a set-up anyway, and it's just to make me look as though I've won a local fight. So I'm not saying that it's true, but it makes you wonder.
Well, it's good to speculate, isn't it? I mean,
the history of this electorate, though, here in Invercargill is incredible. When you think the fact that it had been national for so long, Mark Peck took it back.
And Ralph Hannon had it for about 50 of the last 100
Mark
years.
Peck managed to hang on to it, through 3 elections. So what did the then Labour government do? They sent down Trevor Mallard to basically destroy the Labour vote down here by closing schools. And then later on said, this isn't working. We've done this damage in Invercargill, so we're going to stop closing schools now. And they kind of wrecked the electorate for Labour down here. She's got a big task ahead of her, because people have got long memories, haven't they?
Wow, and the funny thing, you mentioned Trevor Mallard, he was made the buddy MP down here. What was the party saying for the last, I think, 6 years or something? He's been the buddy MP because we don't have a sitting MP.
We don't like the man.
And he's on the outer. He's no longer the strategist for the election campaign for the first time in many years. And let's talk about that media coverage, being the incumbent and that sort of thing that gives you that natural advantage. A survey was done on the last election combining the column inches of Phil Goff and John Key, and Phil Goff had about 5 times less coverage. That's what comes to you as Prime Minister.
But that's the whole thing. Governments lose elections. No one ever wins something. The incumbent loses. I mean, I think that's generally accepted.
That's what we've seen for the last 20 years.
Well, Helen Clark said that in 1999. I remember talking to her at the Grey Power meeting out at the Ascot, and I said, is it just that there's a lot of factor of people just get sick of familiar faces? And she said yes, that was an element.
Does the present national government look like a government?
Well, that's why they're ringing the changes.
No.
That's why they're ringing the changes.
And
they know this formula.
But that's where Invercargill electorate is going to be interesting, because it's not anyone's to lose. No. It's 2 people's to win.
Right.
2
people, 2 women.
Yeah.
And
it's be exciting.
Well, maybe 3 if what rumours are that Rhea Bond will be selected for New Zealand First.
So what are we saying, that at the end of the day, we know in 6 months' time that Invercargill is going to be represented, for the first time by a woman.
By a woman.
So
fantastic.
there you are.
There you go.
And
one thing we can be sure.
And that's certainly what the Labour Party were asking for with a quota.
Oh yeah.
And National certainly didn't, but they will be inclined that way.
And include the Southland, new candidate there too.
Yeah, well, Connor English. Well, I thought it was all going to be Connor English, the Right Honourable Bill English's brother, but people are saying to me no.
No, he said categorically no, he's not.
But that people may have been you, actually.
Did you say that?
But it's quite
Look at the
spooky.
influence you're having.
But it's quite spooky, you know, when you see Connor English being interviewed on the telly. He's just a spitting image of his brother. They've got the same mannerisms and they sound the same, so that would be a bit spooky.
It's a bit spooky. I tell you, it would be a big advantage that Bill English has been a very popular politician in the Southland. If Connor wanted to be the candidate, wanted to be the representative for that area, I've got no doubt.
I would say it would be his.
Yeah, be
People would just say English and go, oh yeah.
English, that's right, yeah. But
the legacy continues.
he may have seen what Bill's been through though and think, I'm having none of that. I mean, why would you do it unless you're particularly keen? So we wait and see.
Yeah, well, that's right. And as I said, New Zealand First are going through their selection process at the end of the month, so we'll know whether they will field a candidate down here. They've got a lovely big office in Cambridge Arcade that's very seldomly manned, I have to say. There's a lot of sign writing there.
Have they put up a candidate?
They did put up one, I think. They haven't for the last 2 or 3 elections. I know in '99 they did.
Yeah.
And Winston's targeting Invercargill and Southland. He mentioned in that interview I keep ranting about this morning that he mentioned Southland and Invercargill about 3 times.
Well, he must
so he's saying, and he's blowing the figures out of the water. He's saying, we contribute 20, Southland contributes, tiny population, 90,000 or whatever, contributes 20% of the GDP. That's where New Zealand comes from. And so he is trying to appeal to the heartland voter.
Well, he knows that it's the party vote that's going to put him in or put him out. I mean, it's nothing to do with getting these local seats.
No,
but I mean, having a big flag bearer down here is going to help, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they were at the AMP show. They had a stand set up, and Rhea was there.
But don't they say though that with parties like that they may put up candidates, but the candidates actually don't want to win either. They just want to promote the party vote. I think.
Well, they want to get on the list, don't they? I think.
I don't know.
You're saying they don't want the responsibility of the constituency?
No, being on standing for a seat. That they do it, but maybe that's just to profile the party rather than...
Well, their realistic aim would be to be on the party list, because their realistic aim could not be to get a seat in Parliament, because I mean, even Winston lost his.
That's Dave Kennedy here, and he's quite upfront about it, saying, I'm here for the list vote. And he lifted the Green vote here by about 1,300 or something.
At the end of the day, the time is going to come where we are going to see one of these minor parties get another candidate back in Parliament. I mean, it's happened
actually
before.
In a constituency.
In a constituency. I mean, we saw it with Jim Anderton.
Well, Epsom, but it takes someone to step down, and of course, our friend Peter Dunn.
Yeah, yes. So he's obviously going to be standing again.
Well, no deals are done yet. Done.
No deals are done.
And there'll be no cups of tea, I wouldn't think.
You wouldn't think so, not with
maybe
John
a quiet
Banks.
Scotch in the back room.
John Banks is going to the High Court to try and have the charges thrown out. I'm actually wondering if he's trying to filibuster the whole thing, or whether he really does think the charges.
And he said, I'm thinking about having another go at the mayoralty.
And then we haven't had the internet party launch yet either.
Oh, well, look, I think that's fallen flat on its face.
You think it might have, the internet party?
Yeah, I think Kim.com's burning through his good feeling credit.
And he hasn't got much money either.
No, well, you can't. No. You know, he's not paying people. He had his pool polished. He owes $5,000 to a contractor in Auckland to have his pool polished.
Yeah, his pool polished.
And there he is flying around in helicopters. And, you know, it's not a good look.
People paying for that. His friends. Yeah, but that'll be...
I tell you what, I was a bit of a .com supporter because he threw an interesting spanner into the works, and I was interested to see what he was going to say. He was calling John Key that John Key had been less than truthful. I don't think he said he'd lied. I may have said he'd lied over the spying and those other things and the fact that he knew that Kim.com was in the country and those sorts of things. So I thought this would make things interesting, you know, as a political commentator looking in. But then he wrote his book, and he said, New Zealand is a boring place. My jet-set billionaire friends come over here and there's nothing for them to do. And it's like, well, mate, you know, you're in exile here. You know, we're not extraditing you. We're fighting that process on your behalf. And here you are saying we're a boring country. Or, you know.
Go and be interested somewhere else.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Go to Monaco and see how long you stay there.
But a whole lot of places won't have him. He's barred from their countries. He's got criminal convictions, you know.
And didn't that look bad for the Greens to have
Russell
visiting
Yeah.
Kim.com?
Yeah.
That was a mistake. Another one.
But Winston's
Like I
been
said,
there.
they keep making them.
So
Yep.
we're saying that it's
Winston
bad
does
for
really
Russell
well.
to go there,
John
but not.
Banks.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's quite desperate, really, isn't it?
No, we just need David Carnworth to be seen being driven away from there.
I've about been flown in a helicopter.
Well, possibly.
Whilst we're talking about that, legislation, there's a couple of things that I'm particularly interested in. There's one of them is power prices. It's not actually legislation. Power prices are going up. Transpower is trying to say it's not our fault. Apparently there's some quite big electricity rises in Auckland, Wellington.
Yeah, on the way, yeah.
Yep, and Transpower saying it's not our fault. It would be only a few dollars per month or whatever it is, and everybody's pointing the finger. We're in a country where basically electricity consumption is falling. There's no question about that. We're not reading in the news that we're short of electricity and having the lights flicked off in the middle of the night. In actual fact, there is probably it's more accurate to say there is a surplus of electricity.
And our hydro lakes are in good state.
And yet people are having to face rises in electricity. What's causing this? Is this because of we've got these privatised companies, some of them feeling the need to make a profit, to pay something out to their shareholders? What's going on here? Should we be asking a lot more questions?
No, it's pretty much it. It's a free market model that our energy suppliers are operating within, and who can blame them? That's the market that's been presented for them to operate in since the late 90s. And what else do we expect? The corporate model is you deliver a profit to your shareholders.
And you can be a shareholder now, can't you?
That's right.
You know?
If you wish to be.
Yeah,
we've just
you
sort of sold your bit, and now you can buy a bit back.
You know, and you can get some profit out of the shares. But
Yeah.
I actually found last year that I looked at my unit use over a year and found out that I was below 9,000 or whatever annually, and I qualify for the low user charge, and I save a good $20, $30, $40 a month.
Wow.
Just on going that.
I thought you were going to say a year. Then.
No, you've got to keep it below 9,000 units a year, and on my Trust Power account, it tells me what my usage is for the past 12 months.
Well, and so,
and it's really cool, because then I get really
turn
everything off.
Things,
turn things off, because I've got to keep it under that threshold to save the money. They didn't offer that to me, but I rung, I don't know how many years I've missed out on it, but that's something for people just to keep an eye on.
Tell us what the threshold is.
It's 9,000 units per whatever that is.
Calendar year, is it?
Per calendar year.
Okay.
So July to July, August to
What
August.
would that equate to about someone's electricity bill per month? Would it be less than 150 a month, or less than 100 a month, or what?
I've got no idea. All I know is that I don't have anything on standby, so I don't have the oven switched on unless I use it, so the clock's not going round. My microwave is always off. I started off 10 years ago absolutely on a budget, and I set these processes in place.
You obviously have no electric heating.
Yeah, I've got a heat pump.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a heat pump, and I'll have that on during the winter, but then I've got a fire, so there's a cost of your fuel, obviously, for the wood burner. But and the other thing was that, was it last year, the year before, I got underfloor insulation put in, the black polythene stuff on the ground so that the moisture doesn't come up. Everything in the ceiling done, and I got double glazing windows put in, and just the difference it makes in holding the heat in for a long time. So
well, there's a private member's bill before Parliament. David Shearer's actually putting it forward to saying that our electricity bill should be broken down, so we can actually see what the transmission charges are and what our local electricity companies are charging us.
Well, EIL has just announced they're putting line charges up from the 1st of April, I think. So this part of that must be...
And what percentile is that, if they said?
Yeah.
Not hugely.
There's no reason for this information.
I'm hearing 25% in some parts of the country.
Yeah, up north here, because they reckon that they've been, they've kind of got caught in contracts. These people caught, whatever you want to say. They've had old contracts which have now run out. And
that was just...
taking the opportunity to put the prices up.
That was just a few. They were the minority, I think, and they basically had been enjoying probably cheaper electricity than they may have done?
I think that, I don't like to be cold, and I will make sure that and I've got no dependents, so it's easy for me to allocate money. There's no unexpected expenses except my own, and I usually see those coming. And I'll make sure there's enough power for me to be warm all the time. But when a house burnt down almost 10 years ago for me, and I had to go flat for a while I saved for a deposit for another house, and I had two elderly ladies living in flats in front of me, and one of them got a heat pump in, great, couldn't afford to run it. They were, you take it for granted when you're on a good income or all right income, you can make sure you're warm, but there are people out there at the sharp end who can't afford to run a heater all the time.
The thing is that sometimes to be stoogey, I won't turn on the heat pump, if it's just a bit chilly, but I'll go and put a hat on my head.
And
I'll
get your merinos out. It's time for the merinos.
and put on a dressing gown over my clothes.
When you're a university student,
I wonder I'm single.
Why not? But I think on these bills, I don't think there's any reason for the information to be kept from us. Who's charging us for what? Otherwise it's out there in the atmosphere in a cloud somewhere where they're saying, the reason the prices are going up because the transmission charges are higher. Well, itemise. I think this bill of David Shearer's going to be a good thing if it goes through. Itemise it on our account.
Is that the David Shearer?
Yes.
The one that used to be the
leader of the Labour Party?
Yeah. Oh, that one.
That one.
That guy that had that 50,000 offshore in that UN account that he didn't declare.
Well, he's doing something.
Another mistake.
He's doing something good here.
Well, that one power, isn't it? What's it called? The Labour's plan to bring all of it, all
Probably
the supplies
power,
together. Everything's Kiwi in front of it with Labour. But I'm waiting to see. They're going to come out pretty heavily on this because their election is in the winter or at the very end of it. People are going to be thinking about their power, and Labour are going to slug.
Exactly.
And it'll be interesting to see John Key go, well, actually, let's set up a panel or a commission to look into the price of power.
Well, we've already got the
and
electricity
mitigate their argument.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And this is the playbook that we're going to see between now and then. And power is a big one, and so is the capital gains tax.
We'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back, so stick with us. Welcome back to Newsroom. We're going to go to topics of interest now, and we're going to start with Karen.
Well, we were talking at work today just about this plane, Malaysian Airlines plane that's disappeared. And it's such a mystery. And we were just chatting about, isn't it funny how you have WikiLeaks and spy agencies and bureaus and NASA doing this and whatnot, and the world cannot account for a huge jet liner with hundreds of people on it. So we've got satellites going all over the place, we've got bugs, we've got this, we've got that, and they've got no idea. And in a way it makes me feel quite good that we're under the impression that someone somewhere knows what we're doing all the time, but it's not true.
But in actual fact,
they've got no idea. So I wonder how much of this is just perception, that whatever you do, wherever you go, someone's watching you, we know what you're doing. They don't know what's happened to a huge jet. They've got no idea where, why, how.
And it's one case in which everybody wished they didn't.
Of course. But I just think it's quite telling that you would expect that some government agency from somewhere in the world would go, at 0400 hours we had a satellite passing over and we saw something. No, nothing. It's amazing.
Most unusual.
It's amazing.
A giant aircraft like that to just disappear off the radar.
No
calls from the pilot.
No.
I've no doubt they'll dig down there and they'll find the black box.
Well, it's an enormous huge area to search.
But it is incredible, isn't it, that no one knows this far? One day, second day, maybe. But
this is not unique, though.
No.
An Air France plane disappeared, and they had a lot of trouble finding it.
They did.
And it was deeper than most people could.
But
no one could dive as deep as it was.
But they still knew sort of roughly, I think.
Yeah, I think they had. It wasn't as big. The search area wasn't as big as it is now. But there have been times where it's taken a year to find planes.
Yeah, but this one is just. I just think it's quite interesting.
So,
this whole, we know everything about everyone, and you can't pick your nose or whatever because there's a camera watching you, and every keystroke someone knows what you're doing. But do they really? Yeah.
In this case, clearly not.
Well, I mean, Boeing will be most interested in this because the 777 is one of the most common
Extremely.
And very
if there's
safe.
something,
Very well known
a
aircraft.
hugely safe record. I think
Yeah.
there's been a couple of incidents that have written planes off. They were first made in '96. I think this one was 2002 or something. So it's not an old plane in the life of planes.
No.
So a catastrophic failure. Why would they change direction
But this is the whole
from
thing.
the planned course?
Now they do know that, don't they?
Why-
They changed direction, tried to turn back.
But the media, this is
Yeah.
where the media has to fill a void. So they're going to fill it with a whole
Yeah.
lot of speculation, a whole lot of
Yes.
stuff.
The
just while we're
conspiracy theorists are just like,
Yeah.
and I think I read somewhere that maybe there was a phone working that was still ringing. So people going, well, it can't be at the bottom of the sea, can it? Because a phone would be dead,
Okay.
and it wouldn't be receiving a signal on the bottom of the
Yeah.
sea. But I redirect my work phone to my personal phone,
Yes.
and there may be a phone ringing somewhere
Yes.
in an apartment that.
And this is where
Absolutely.
it's going to probably get more outlandish as the days
Yeah,
go
until
on.
they find
and
it.
because the media are going to go, you have to fill the papers.
And
with
I
it.
think you feel for those families.
There's this hunter in the background going, I just hope it ditched somewhere and all
Yeah.
radio communications were lost and
Yep.
the dinghies were deployed
Oh.
and they got to a little island, or that's
Yep.
the ultra optimistic view of the situation.
But the last I heard, just driving in here tonight, was the fact that something may have happened in the cabin where they all went unconscious.
Hypoxia.
Yeah, and that it's just a ghost plane
Yeah,
flying
until it
around
runs
until
out
it
of
runs
fuel.
out of fuel.
Yeah.
And everyone's in this sort, they've gone into a nice sleep
Yeah,
or whatever.
just drop off.
And drop
and
off.
it happens that quickly with depressurization.
Yeah.
Suddenly you're just at 40,000,
Yeah.
38,000 feet.
Yeah, and imagine the silence of a plane flying along, but that would, yeah.
There's something about, I do watch air crash investigations.
So do I. Who
and
doesn't?
there is something intriguing about it,
Yeah,
isn't it? That
yeah.
the state-of-the-art method of transport is fallible, and then the mechanisms we have that obviously manufacturers don't want their Airbus to have a reputation. So you've got these massive resources. Imagine what that's
Yeah.
costing to search for this plane right now. And it does come down to money. They end up going, well, we've got 30 days before the black box transponder stops. So we've got to find it in that time.
But what's
or to
great
get it.
is that New Zealand's even involved in that
Yeah.
search. It's a multi
Yeah, there's
country.
10,
Well, everybody-
10 Chinese
Yeah.
satellites
Yeah.
over the area.
Yeah.
Everybody's got an interest in it, haven't they? I mean,
Yeah.
the personal tragedy for those families.
150
of-
plus Chinese,
of
3
not-
Americans.
Of
I think.
actually not knowing
Knowing,
is
yeah.
must be terrible.
Mm.
And I mean, we've seen some of it in the media in New Zealand. It's absolutely appalling.
Mm.
But they will want to know what's wrong with that
They will
plane.
want to
If there's
know.
anything happened to that plane.
Yeah.
And someone was saying even this morning on BBC that if the power did go off, they've still got an hour of batteries to
Yes.
make some sort of signal to say we've had a catastrophic breakdown in power or hydraulics
Yeah.
Well, it's
or
happened
whatever.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the resources that will go into finding out what happened will be huge. But you've got to find the plane. You can just speculate.
Exactly. Right. We wait and see. Hunter. Topic of interest.
Yeah, well,
We know what yours is.
actually, capital gains tax.
Yeah.
And that's Labor's policy last election, and it didn't get much traction at all. And this is their big card, I think, that they're going to probably produce people from the World Bank and various other prestigious organisations, because we're the only country in the OECD that doesn't have some form of capital gains tax. Now, if you're of the right of the political spectrum, we're encouraging business. This is all about the free market, the corporate image. If ACT had their way, we'd privatise prisons, probably the armed forces. Good Lord knows really what they would like to do. But, I think that we should be encouraging people. What's happened in the last 60 years, probably more, is that people have been encouraged to buy property, because that's where you make your money, investment property. So traditional right-wing voters have made all their money out of investment properties.
Absolutely.
And so national, technically, the ideology of the right should be saying capital gains tax, because what you want to do is to encourage those people at home with their retirement nest egg not to go, well, that's a big payout we've just got, let's buy 3 flats in North Invercargill. You want them to go, well, we're going to be stung for that, or sell them or whatever. We're stung with capital gains, so let's invest in the stock market. Let's invest in a business. So that should be National's mantra, given where they are politically on the spectrum.
It's not where their
it's
support,
not because their support
comes from there.
has spent 60 years making
Yep.
an enormous amount of money out of property investment.
Yep.
And let's look at what we've got in Auckland now. We've got a lot of people living in houses that they can't afford to live in. They could certainly never afford to buy them. They're paying an enormous amount of rent, so what are we doing as a government? We're subsidising their rent for them to live in Auckland. And
That's
where
right.
does that money go? Who owns those properties?
The same people you were talking about. So they're caught.
And so now
Yeah.
we're using government, our money down here as taxpayers who have made the choice to live in Invercargill and buy a house for the price of a deposit on an Auckland house. Our taxes are going to subsidise people to go and live in South Auckland and struggle to pay enormous rents.
And we
And
should be.
there are examples of people making 350 a week take home in Auckland and getting that much back in a rent subsidy.
Yeah.
And let's not mention working for families, which is
Right.
another scenario.
Right.
So, in a way, I want to see how Labor plays this card
Yeah.
because it's huge. And if they play it right, they'll win a lot of votes. And it will make a lot of national voters.
A lot of it's about-
national voters go, you know, they're right.
A lot of it's about education, isn't it? But, you know, people understanding the reasons and the need for it. Surely, with the house market hitting the highs that it's hit now, it's outrageous. Auckland is the second most expensive city in the world, I believe.
But I still think that when it comes to voting, people are saying, what's in it for me? And the last Labor government got in on their working for families promise. I think I'm right, but it wasn't, we're going to penalise someone on a basis that you don't understand. It's like, we're giving you something. That's all that, you know, sort of
That
makes
works.
people tick, yeah.
And the issue was, you know, we are facing, the population isn't, we need more people to support the baby boomers who are soon going to retire en masse and be a burden, not a burden because they've been contributing.
Costly.
Let's look at what's happened in the last 30 years to
I
their
intend
taxes.
to be costly.
Yeah, right. You know, and I'll probably make it there myself, I hope. But
Build the burden.
fundamentally we have to think of our future, and it's not about, I know people have done very well out of property, and my family, my grandfather was a big investor in property, so have my parents been, and my sister. They make a good living out of it, and who can blame them? Because it can be done.
But at some stage it has to be addressed, and you know, somebody's got to have the get up and go. Some government has got to have the will to address it, and as you say, Labor have already nailed their colours to the mast. How are they going to
see how they play that card? And
Yep.
I just want to quickly mention, I know time's getting on, but that working for families, I know someone who runs their own business, and when that came in, he was going, Hunter, I just make my business look like it's not making a profit. I get $140 extra a week.
Right.
And he's on a good wicket.
Yeah.
But there are, and who can blame him? I mean, inside I was going, "Rrr,
Yeah.
rrr, that's my taxes. But he's a good bloke. He's just seen a loophole.
Yeah.
It's not up to him. He's
Him and
looking after his
thousands of others.
family.
Yeah.
And he's probably contributing that money, which he is, back to the economy, but it's taxpayers' money, and you know,
Cool.
let's watch with interest.
What I'm watching with interest in the last 1 minute is the Credit
I've eaten
Contracts
into
and
your time.
Financial Services Law Reform Bill, which has passed its first reading in September. We haven't seen it move any further yet. It is the bill which should protect poorer people in poorer neighbourhoods from being victimised by loan sharks. And stuff.co.nz had a very good write-up on it in their papers recently. It was very, very well written. And just pointing out the fact that there are people being continually pressured and victimised to take out loans they struggle to pay back at exorbitant interest rates. We're one of the few Western countries who has not yet capped that interest rate which may be charged. Australia and many others have capped at 48%. The will is not there in this bill to do that at the moment. My thought was, when the American government wanted Kim.com, we're back to Kim.com again, reached out of his mansion on some, I don't know, thoughts that maybe the copyright laws in America had been breached. The police went in masse with all sorts of force and did it, but there doesn't seem to be any will in the government to do a simple thing to protect our poor people in New Zealand. It's got to be done. And they're very tardy in doing it. It's that like those folk don't exist. And probably today, somebody else has been victimised by people, loan sharking companies, who couldn't care less about the welfare of the people they're loaning money to, in some cases, unnecessarily, to buy some TV that they don't need. Now that's my spout, and we're out of time, so you can't say anything. We'll see you again in a fortnight. Thank you very much for watching. Ka kite anō. We'll see you later.